Hi, my name is James Ford. I'm doing this is a video blog um, for crisis counseling and trauma care, crisis response and trauma care. Um, 6323 for fall of 2024. And we are responding to the video that was in our content titled Needs and Challenges of Disaster. There's three areas, three questions that we are responding to. What are the needs and challenges of the heroic phase of disaster? How people respond to disasters. The second question is the honeymoon phase can include a crash point. Describe who, when, and why this may occur. And during the disillusionment phase, fear, anger, and hopelessness can set in. What types of clinical conditions may develop from these circumstances, and what type of treatment is best to overcome them? So in my response to these questions, I'll start off with what are the needs and challenges of the heroic phase. The needs and challenges of the heroic phase need to provide people a way to kind of decompress and maybe even recruit some more people to kind of take the pressure off some of the survivors of the disaster. Some people may become frantic and have a lot of impulsive energy, and that's where some of the heroic actions that you see often on the news coming from. And instead of accepting the impact of the disaster, if they keep staying in this heroic phase, they can experience burnout pretty quick, and for maybe after a week or so, and flat out deny the actual impact the disaster has had. And they may even deny resources. So the needs of the people should also include having resources available for survivors, and maybe even some of the very first responders to the disaster. Offering healthy coping mechanisms on the side as a way for people to relax and maybe provide some, in this stage, they definitely will need some psychological first aid to kind of help become aware of what they need to do, because they could be so consumed by their the amount of adrenaline and fight or flight response they have going on. Because the heroic phase is the most recent after disaster, psychological first aid will be crucial to people who might deny the impact or refusing to accept, the extent of their needs. It's very similar to fight or flight in the sense that people's adrenaline is very high. We can even look at the 9/11 attacks in 2001, how fast people were performing heroic actions, and the amount of impulsive energy that, eventually died down after, a month or two, when it really set in for how long of a recovery that was going to take just for that area, for that amount of people. Moving on to the honeymoon phase. The honeymoon phase can include a crash point. Describe who, when, why, and where this may occur. So after the heroic phase, we find the honeymoon phase, and it's usually the the crash of the heroic phase. It's the beginning phase when the initial adrenaline of fight or flight wears off. This phase will affect a lot of survivors and the initial first responders as well, because the adrenaline will be higher than normal, with people who directly experienced the disaster, and the very first responders on the scene. Um, Oftentimes, they will experience the bigger um, crash of the heroic phase, and they experience more burnout than the long term effort, recovery effort, you know, that take place. The initial direct services such as search and rescue and major medical assistance is probably no longer needed. The Red Cross will probably be in the area. Um, this is also the time when large disaster assistance becomes available too. Heroic actions often stop, and we see more of a relief. Um, People that specialize in relief efforts and disaster recovery and rebuilding support, being established. And we will also see probably see established counseling centers, nonprofits, churches, and maybe even and churches may even contribute to the recovery during the honeymoon phase. There'll be plenty of support. Um, and this will also be a time to that people will need to have their more psychological or mental status exams conducted. You will need to. This is one of the best times to start administering psychological first aid as well, because the heroic phase sometimes they'll deny it. So this is the phase where everything's kind of calming down, and resources are starting to be established, and everyone kind of knows where the resources are at. Some of the things that um, could be affected are, or who might be involved are, maybe people providing Bible studies, people fundraising, and a lot of you know people experienced with psychological first aid and assessing people for like PTSD type symptoms or other mood related disorders that might be exhibiting worse symptoms than they normally do. About to sneeze. Um, Moving on. Whew. Excuse me. During the disillusionment phase, fear, anger, and hopelessness can set in. What types of clinical conditions may develop from these circumstances, and what type of treatment is best to overcome them? The disillusionment is the phase when all the adrenaline and the fight or flight completely wears off. And this is often when also burnout is experienced by a lot of people who were providing help, and the survivors as well. This is the stage where PTSD is more visible. Maladaptive coping, may form, such as like substance abuse, eating disorders, an increase in family violence, mood disorders, and personality disorders may exhibit like more symptoms than they usually do. People usually have a sense of hopelessness, and they might also feel abandoned because most of the major efforts to recover are not as visible and active as they once were in the beginning. So the connection and the camaraderie that was established, in the first month or 2 and 3 months of a disaster, um, they're no longer present at all. The best treatment for the people experiencing this type of distress and the maladaptive coping skills is probably individual psychotherapy and group counseling, and specific counseling to focus on um, individual issues with people and larger community needs, where you can put people together in group counseling sessions, or you can go out and perform activities together as a community and socialize and build that camaraderie up. Some of the needs could also include that could be provided, not necessarily clinical intervention, but like resource mapping, for people, larger, or emotion management education and counseling, and providing forms of social cohesion and community. The clinical settings should focus more on cognitive behavior therapy interventions, maybe some family counseling, um, substance abuse or substance use and addiction counseling, and possibly some behavior therapy interventions for other mood and personality disorders. So coming to the conclusion, of this, I have included the following resources in my response, and I'll probably also include them in the description of the video below too. Um, Resources and mapping during a natural disaster, a case study on the 2015 Nepal earthquake. Regions, emotions, and left behindness, a phase model for understanding the emergence of regional embitterment. The needs and challenges of the disaster, the video that we watched. Visualizations of endurance in Time Magazine's Beyond 9/11. Social cohesion and resilience across communities that have experienced disaster. Social cohesion and resilience across communities that have experienced, oh, that was the second, that was a repeat. And post-disaster psychological intervention since 9/11, and applying the phases of disaster response to COVID-19 recovery. And this is my journal, my blog.